Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Dynamics 365 Security and Licensing Enforcement, What's New and What It Means for You. I'm Sebastian Anderson with the Licensing and Database Desk here at Avantiico. With 2026 well underway, D365 licensing enforcement isn't slowing down, and neither can you. Staying on top of the latest requirements, compliance deadlines, and reporting hurdles is critical to keeping your Dynamics environment running smoothly. To help you navigate what this means for your organization, we're joined by Morten Løgstrup, our Director of Customer Engagement, and Tatiana Subotin, our Licensing and Database Technical Lead. They'll be walking us through what Microsoft's new rolling compliance means for FNSCM users, how to use Azure Telemetry Insights to improve remediation outcomes, what's new in user security and governance, how to audit your current license usage and roles ahead of enforcement, real-world examples of how our clients and others have avoided thousands in unexpected licensing costs, and a special limited time assessment offer for attendees to the show here today. Morten will be taking over shortly, but before we get started with today's session, I'd love to share some of the other exciting webinars and events we have coming up. First off, you can join us live right now in person at Dynamics Minds 2026. As we speak, members of the Avantiico team are on site at the beautiful Grand Hotel Bernardin in Portorož, Slovenia. As one of the premier events on the D365 community calendar, Dynamics Minds is the perfect opportunity to meet other Microsoft specialists, MVPs, and partners, including gold sponsors of the show, like us. The convention will be winding down tomorrow, May 27th, so I wouldn't rush to the airport if you're not already in attendance. But if you and your team are already on-prem, please feel free to say hello. If you want, you can let us know in the chat here too. We'll do our best to track you down. Next, on June 4th, tune in to D365 FNSCM 10.0.48 updates. Don't be blindsided. You'll see live demos of the most impactful 1048 updates, get practical insights on the 2026 one version release cycle, and learn how to align new features with your roadmap to maximize your return on investment. We will have other events and webinars added to the calendar, so be sure to keep an eye on this space. We've got some exciting things coming in 2026 that you won't want to miss. On top of that, please let us know if there are any topics you would like to see us cover in the future. All registration links for these events will be available in the chat, on our website, and within this slide deck. One last note, as we go through this presentation, do not hesitate to pop any questions you have into the chat. There will be a few interludes for questions during the show, as well as an open Q&A at the tail end of the webinar. Any questions that aren't answered live will be addressed in direct email follow-up. And with that, Morten, take it away.
Thank you, Sebastian. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Sorry, my voice is a little bit beat up, but I think we can go through it. And please ask any questions, as Sebastian mentioned, and we will do our best to cover it in this session or a separate session for you. For today, we will check on some of the Microsoft updates and deadlines. You should know about them. If not, take a screenshot of a couple of slides that I'm going to show. We will look into the PPAC reports and some of the bugs we still know are existing. And then we will give you a short introduction to what we call an advanced security and licensing assessment. And then Tatiana will show you how to clean up security roles, because the tools in D365 Finance and Supply Chain probably need a little bit of acceleration in order for customers to really take advantage of them. And Tatiana will walk you through that. With that said, let's jump into the Microsoft announcement. Everybody probably saw that Microsoft changed the enforcement dates a couple of times to now being by a case-by-case scenario. So check your license renewal dates, and then you can find or figure out when users will receive a warning banner if they don't have the right licenses, and also when they potentially will lose system access. We do know that it's for the commercial cloud, which is the vast majority of Microsoft customers. We do know it's for all these products listed here, and you can see in your PPAC report what you are missing. But we wanna help you understand how you can actually optimize it so that you're not purchasing licenses that you potentially do not need. Some of the unknowns, we don't know when Microsoft are enforcing device licenses and storage. I think my best guess would be next year. We do know, and that's over here in the category of updates. We do know many customers are seeing the warning banner. We do also know that D365 Commerce, in some cases, are actually shown as a license that are needed for users, even though they actually do not need it. So we have a couple of tickets with Microsoft because we were told it's fixed in 47, but we have some customers that are still seeing issues with commerce licensing, showing that it's needed, even though it's not. We have not yet seen any customers or users losing access because they have no licenses assigned to them. So I think Microsoft might still be working on that. Yeah. With that said, let's jump to the next slide. Remember to keep a track on the licensing guide. Microsoft release a new licensing guide approximately the first week of each month. And in that licensing guide, there is a really good change log, or we call it what have they done recently. And in the very, very top on the first or second page, you see all the different updates that they're doing. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because in some cases, it actually impact your licensing. So, for example, they could change some of the team member entitlement so that you think, oh, they're a fine team member, and it could actually be operation, for example. So keep an eye on the change log. It's top of the page on every single licensing guide. Any questions, Sebastian?
No questions so far, but
Yep.
everybody, if you have them, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Good. So this one, we have covered it the last couple of webinars as well. This is pretty much an illustration of the validation timeline. So back to what I mentioned earlier, check with either your CSP or your EA when your licenses are up for renewal, because that is what's triggering the banner, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Down here, there's a couple of examples. You can take a screenshot and then try to work with your renewal dates. If you have different dates, let's say January 1st, January 15, and January 30, it's the first day that Microsoft are counting. So keep an eye on that. This is the notification banner we see. Many of our customers are now seeing this in different shapes and forms, but you will use Access.
You want me to swap over so you guys can like have a bigger seat or like squash tables together or something? I don't care at all. No, I'm totally good.
Sebastian, can you mute?
Let me go ahead and do that. Yeah, just as a little heads up, everyone, please make sure you are muted if you're in the background, unless you have a question. And even so, we do prefer you type those in the chat, just so we keep things running smooth.
Well, yep, thank you, Sebastian. So system access, we haven't heard from a single customer that their users have lost access because of no license assigned. Even though they have seen the banner and so on and so forth. So I think Microsoft is still working on it. But remember, give users at least one license assigned, and you should be good for now. Then you can, in parallel, work on cleaning up your security roles so that you are SOX compliance and segregation of duty and so on and so forth. This is yet to see. We have not seen it yet. Some of the tools that you have available. Use your PPAC, use your admin center to assign licenses, of course. And then Tatiana will show the module within D365. And Sebastian also mentioned telemetry. Telemetry is key because that actually gives you live insight to what's going on and what users are using what. Remember, it only applies to production instances, so you can have as many users in your sandboxes. There's no enforcement on that. Admins, we do see a lot of customers with service accounts and admin accounts. Sometimes the might be triggering a license, so please go back and review if they are clean admin accounts or service accounts, and then you can avoid needing a license for those. In the PPAC report, I think it has come far from last year. There's still some slight issues, and I actually don't know. Okay, up here that says commerce, but check your commerce because I see that as a bug in most customer reports. Up here, you can also drill into the different details. If you, for example, click on the view under license users, you can actually see what's driving, for example, a finance license. And it's in those cases that I see users needing commerce, even though there's no security roles that are actually driving commerce. So that can be a bug in the system, and we recommend creating a ticket with Microsoft so that you are not getting audited or anything for that reason. Any questions, Sebastian?
No questions, but a few comments from folks who have seen some blocks for unlicensed users.
Okay.
So just some confirmation that it is indeed happening.
Good. The advanced analysis, and the whole point of getting this analysis, or at least doing it, is to establish the baseline. What is the licensing needed? What is the license you have? And what is the delta? That's one thing. But getting a report that are detailing how you can optimize your license so that you are not purchasing license that you don't need, that is extremely valuable. We also deliver these. We deliver these licensing assessment in 10 days time, and that gives you a long report showing what's driving the different licenses, and we base this on the telemetry data. And then we also give you hands-on recommendations on how you can actually change some security roles so that you avoid paying for license that you're not using. So telemetry, licensing assessment, and then remediation. In the remediation, we have started to add segregation of duties because we know, especially in England, that is a new rule that was put in place from January 1st. So that is a very, very hot topic as we speak. But with that said, I'll hand it over to Tatiana, and she will go through the how to clean it up demo.
Sounds like a plan. Give our resident expert a little time to appear on camera there.
Did I appear?
Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Okay, great. So today I will steal your screen, Morten, and we will go through our analysis.
Perfect. Can't be stealing if we hand it over freely.
Yes. This is my pleasure to share. So what are we going to do today? Today I'm going to answer most common questions about the silver bullet. Like, if I had a silver bullet, what would it be related to over licensing? We're talking about over licensing. We're not talking about basic security. We're not talking about security configuration. We're talking about primarily how to save money on sometimes tiny changes in your configuration, in your security and user configuration to avoid over licensing. And this is probably the most common question. Like, don't go into details, show us the silver bullet. Today is all about the silver bullet. So I will show you 3 strategies how to avoid over licensing. And this is going to be a hands-on session. Everything what you see today, the PowerPoint presentation and the Excel spreadsheet are shareable. So if you need this information, we will be happy to share. There's nothing related to our clients or any information that we like any proprietary information. So by request, we will be happy to share this with you guys. The first common issue I see in almost all environments is inactive users. Yes, first of all, the licensing guide. As Morten mentioned, we have the licensing guides released first days of every month, and sometimes there is an additional information released along with the license guide. So please feel free to validate your license requirements according to this licensing guide. So first of all, inactive users. This is very common. Almost every environment has inactive users, and it turned out to be quite unclear how to identify inactive users. We have two sources of information. I will switch back and forth between the presentation and the D365 finance and supply chain to show you the real example. As I mentioned, it's going to be hands-on. So two main sources of inactive users. And inactive users, sometimes it's the most licensing saving point. Once you validate, once you identify inactive users and you deactivate them, you can see a significant saving in your PPAC report, like a significant drop in the license requirement. So two sources of inactive users. The first source is user activity agent report. User activity agent report, you can copy the link from starting from the question mark down to the end of the URL, and you can paste it in. I'm doing the same like me. The link is here. As usually, I will share it in our chat. Those who didn't have a chance to validate your inactive user activity agent report, we are pasting this link here right after slash, and we see the user activity agent report. The user activity agent report shows you which user is enabled, and it shows you also when the last logon date happened. You can add agent profile, and you will see who recently accessed this environment, who accessed this environment long time ago, and make your decision on inactivity of the users. This is the first point. Is it a reliable point? In most cases, yes. However, during this analysis for multiple customers, we found that sometimes we need to add more information. And the next point, the next more reliable point is telemetry. You can configure your telemetry. It's quite easy. We refer to our website. You can find the other tutorials how to configure telemetry. And if we pull this information, so I will go to, I will follow the link. The link is in the presentation. I will follow the link. I will open our resource, application insights resource, and switching to KQL mode and running a very simple query. You can find all activities by user, by date, and by the access point, entry point. So this is the second source. Combining these two sources, we can assess our users, and we can make a decision on who is active, who is inactive. It's quite simple. So as you see, user activity aging, the last logon date presents the real UI logon date, and telemetry shows you real activity, how users moved from one menu item to another menu item, how they opened windows, how they accessed different entry points. So these two combined give you quite reliable source of activity analysis. There are exceptions, as usual. Let's talk about exceptions. So exceptions, what we have. Usually we have users, and like from client to client, I hear this like this user's an active user. We know this, but activity agent report and telemetry don't show any activity for this user. And
Bitte?
the reasons, there are multiple reasons. In most cases, it's a user who is operating in the D365 finance and supply chain via an integration point. And again, we need to know how this integration is built, how the user operates, what the user exactly is doing, and we cannot cross out this user, right? Just because there is no activity. So these are two examples of different integration points and different license requirements based on the integration. The first example is a well-known invoice capture application. The invoice capture, it's just an example, right? It's these examples are not limited by the number of examples by this list. There are multiple and much more. But one application is built on the virtual entities. So the communication between the application and D365 finance and supply chain is based on the virtual entities. The virtual entities is a technology. I don't want to go to these details, but this technology requires an active user presence in both sides of this integration. The one side is a Power Platform, and it's an invoice capture application. And the second side is finance and supply chain. So the active user should be present and should be active in both applications. Then the user can operate and can create transactions exclusively using invoice capture application, but transactions show up in finance and supply chain. In this case, finance and supply chain license is required. The second example, again, not limited, but like in some cases, we can consider project operations, field service applications, sales application, and the other applications based on the model-driven applications or in a Power Platform. If they are based on dual right, then the user who is operating in this model-driven application, like project operations, field service, this user actually creates records in finance and supply chain indirectly, not under this user ID, but under an application user. So such user may not require a supply chain license, or it may not require a finance and supply chain license, D365 finance and supply chain. We cannot guarantee that this user doesn't need a license, but we say that there are cases when this user does not need a license. Again, certain applications are built on a mix of dual right and virtual entities, or it can be like operations built only on dual right. Everything that's built based on dual right technically doesn't require a finance and supply chain management license. So these are exceptions. These types of users, if they're exclusively using model-driven apps, they're going to be inactive from the activity agent report and from the telemetry report. And we can, if we know that certain users are using model-driven apps based on the virtual entities, we cannot inactivate these users because we will completely stop their operations, their daily activity in the model-driven. So we need to be very, very careful with an activity agent report and telemetry. And as I said, in most cases, this is enough. Like activity agent and telemetry is enough to assess activity users, but this is an exception. The second interesting case, again, this case shows up quite often. This is why I think it's important to cover. It looks simple. However, since it shows up often, I will talk about this. This is correct and invoke permissions in certain privileges. So how it happens, right? Historically, like years and years, let's say for good 7 years, when we duplicated permissions, when we duplicated privileges, we would be able to update entry points permissions in UI, Dynamics D365 UI, right? Right here, let me show you what I mean. This screen is a system administration security configuration screen, and privileges pulled, duplicated with updated permissions, right? Let me pull this privilege. So that's this privilege. As you know, we were able to update these permissions when we duplicated privileges for years, and the only permissions we were able to update were the first 4: read, update, create, and delete. In the past, when we duplicated permissions, we didn't have access to correct and invoke permissions. And since they were hidden, we sometimes didn't know that the full permission, duplicated full permission, still carries correct, granted, and invoke granted. It was absolutely harmless for the users. However, it was harmful for the license, because such case requires a full license, either correct or invoke. Both of them require a full license. So the combination when read is granted and correct is granted is a full license, even though technically it is a view-only permission. And technically we used to duplicate, update 3 permissions to unset or to deny, and we would still require a full license. This is a very common case. And when we do our security analysis, we usually bring this case, we analyze this scenario, and we bring the list of the privileges that still carry a full license requirement, even though they are technically view only. And we see that somebody attempted to update a privilege to a view only, but they didn't have access to correct and invoke. Relatively recently, Microsoft added 2 more permissions here, and you have access. So you can analyze your security and find those cases that unnecessarily require full license. How to do it? Again, it's going to be in the presentation. You can refer to this presentation. We can go to the security analysis report, and we can apply 2 filters. One is for the correct permission, another one is for the invoke permission. Let's go to the security analysis report. Not this user, user agent. So we're going to the security analysis report. Before you apply any filter, please don't forget to rebuild your report. Rebuild takes about 15 minutes. Give it rebuild, fully populate this data, and then you're welcome to the analysis. And in my case, as I said, so we are applying read permission to equal to grant. Update is I should say not grant. The other permissions, I'm looking for the permissions that has correct equal to grant. That's the case. It takes time. It's a huge table behind the scenes. It has about 400,000 lines in my case, and once it's applied, right, we see this picture. What we need to do for such configuration, we need to go to security configuration and unset this permission to for correct and invoke. Still thinking. Yes, okay. So it found one privilege. I found a privilege that carries this combination, and I can go to this privilege as I showed before, and I can unset correct or invoke permission. This is the second case, most common case where overconsumption, like license overconsumption, is obvious. And the third case is not as clear as the first two, but still, the third case is probably the most interesting because I see this case more and more. And when I saw it first time, I thought, okay, it's just my bad luck or the company's bad luck. But since I started seeing this more and more, I needed to share it with you guys. So the case is when one role requires multiple licenses, and there are a few complications in this case. It's not just one role requiring multiple licenses. So how do we find the roles that require multiple licenses? The gold standard, Microsoft gold standard, is to configure roles so that one role, one license, like one role requires one license. And if you have multiple licenses, you're better to split roles because when we analyze telemetry, and we do it a lot, we find often that people tend to use permissions requiring one license. It's rarely when people under the same role they they access permission, they use permissions or they access menu items that require like multiple licenses. It's very, very rare. Like let's say among 100 people assigned to the role with the multiple licenses, you will see something like 70, 80 people using one license and maybe 20, 30 using both licenses or all three licenses. All three is probably like I've probably never seen it, but two licenses, yes, sometimes under the same role. So it makes sense to split the role into two, and it makes sense to assign roles according to your telemetry, according to real utilization. However, yeah.
One quick thing, Tatiana, before we get further, in your user activity aging form, there are several checkboxes which aren't necessarily visible to everyone. Are there certain settings that you have to enable in your environment to get those visible?
Yes, that's a great question. This is a great question. Oh, this is a great question. Yes, it is a setting. And unfortunately, I don't remember from the top of my head where the setting is, but I will keep 5 minutes to get back to this question because when it was released, it was in one place. Then Microsoft moved it to another place. I will follow up and I will answer this question. I promise.
Awesome. Yeah, always good to ask stuff like that. Make sure you're seeing the same things we are.
Yes, agent periods. It's by setting. At least it used to be by setting. So let me go back to multiple licenses. There is a way, and Microsoft suggests to use this trick. There is a way to split one role, like in this case, right? To split one role into a few by license. So I take a role that requires 3 licenses. How do I know that it's 3 licenses? I go to the security, system administration, security governance, user licenses usage summary, and in a second, it's going to pop up. And role licenses tab doesn't give you actually what you need. You need to look at the user role licenses. I can pull the user who is assigned to this role, and you will see that the role you need to look through the user perspective. The role requires 3 licenses, and 3 licenses. So, like my first thing is like what Microsoft recommends to do first. Like Microsoft recommends to go to the security configuration and duplicate this role. While you're duplicating, they recommend to select the license. And you can duplicate this role 3 times while you're selecting finance license, and it's going to be the same role with the finance only entry points. Then you're going to duplicate the same role with the HR license, and it's going to be the same role but with the HR entry points. And supply chain management, and it's going to be the same role with the supply chain on entry points. This is one way, and it's a solid way, reliable way. You will get to the point where you're going to get clear roles, three roles by license. However, in most cases, people don't do it. People ask me and other people, like around others, what drives the license? What exactly? Why do I have 3 licenses? How did it happen? Sometimes people ask me, like, how did it happen? What's going on here? Where are these tiny things that drives everything? That we thought it's a supply chain, but we see 3 licenses. So how to analyze all of this? The first attempt everybody does is people go to the second tab, role license. And if you go to the second tab, you pull this role. You pull those 3 licenses. We know those 3 licenses that are required. We don't need the other licenses. We only need 3. As you see, it's somewhat a little bit of commerce. It's somewhat a little bit of activity, team member, right? But we know that this role requires 3 licenses, and we go exactly to those licenses, like those SKUs that we saw through the user perspective. So the 3 SKUs, and the trick with the 2 SKUs is quite clear. You can find which entry point belongs to one SKU, or which entry point belongs to another SKU. With the 3 SKUs, it's a trick. So what entry point behind the scenes belongs to finance, which one belongs to human resource, and which one belongs to supply chain. And besides, you need to find privileges and duties that contain each entry point. This is the exercise we are going through right now. I'm going to show you how we do this analysis. We scale it up, of course. We do with thousands millions records. It's true. Sometimes security analysis report is over 1 million records. We do it with 1 million records. But one example is enough. This one example is enough to understand the whole approach, the whole algorithm. So 3 licenses. And absolutely confusing. I know for most people, it's absolutely confusing. What you need to do? You need to go, first of all, you need to go back to the security analysis report, and you need to export this security analysis report with the role filtering. That's the first step. So we go to the security analysis report. Do we have the security analysis of Azure? And we export this report for this particular role. Right-click, export all roles, or you can go to the Microsoft Office button and select related entry point. Both ways will work for you. You will get the security analysis report with the exported, something like this, with the exported role, with all permissions.
While this is exporting, there's a question from Siegfried that might be relevant to this. So when licensing enforcement gets underway, how will the system handle users assigned to security roles that contain not entitled security objects? Will the system block the user from logging in, block access to the entire role, or will it only restrict access to the specific security objects that are not entitled?
Ideally, when it starts working, it will restrict access to the not entitled objects when it starts working.
Mm-hmm.
Morten, what should we add? Right now, there is no real enforcement. Microsoft is still.
You're still working on it. But who knows? It can probably change tomorrow. It can also change in a week. It can also change in a month. We don't have the insight as of now.
We don't know when it's going to start working, and we know that the statement was that the user is going to lose access to the entry points that are not entitled to the license that the user obtained. However, there is no clear picture how it's going to be. Is it going to be something like, let's say, I'm a supply chain license owner, and I also want to create and post a GL journal, right? How is it going to be? Would my license let me open the GL journal, but the new button would be disabled, or like what exactly is going to be? Because viewing the GL journal is a team member, right? View only is a team member. Creating a new journal is a finance license. If I don't have a finance license, ideally I shouldn't have access to the new button, to the post button, to the other buttons that are entitled to the finance license. We don't know how it's going to be, but the statement was that we would lose access to the entry points that are not entitled to the license that we have. So I cannot answer this question. I cannot 100% guarantee that it's going to be the scenario that I just described, unfortunately. But
we'll definitely keep you posted as we know more too.
But right now, Microsoft is still working on entitled, not entitled entry points, and we don't have an update.
So can I have one question here related to this security role? Good evening, and thank you very much. So I have a user who is playing three roles.
Right.
Okay. So did system shows a requirement of multiple licenses or one license?
It
So
depends
for
on.
example, yeah,
Mhm.
for example, he's looking into the purchase creation and purchase cycle or AR and supply chain, three roles. So will systems show three license requirement?
Purchase creation, if it's just a purchase order creation, it is a activity license. AR cycle depends where in the cycle you are. It can be a supply chain, it can be a finance license. Depending on what user is doing, it can be one of three, or it can be two licenses. If the user is only creating purchase order, activities enough. If the user is creating purchase order and processing purchase order, this is a supply chain license. Supply chain license will cover activity because supply chain license is a higher level of license. All activity menu items, all activity entry points will be covered, as well as team member entry points will be covered. So having supply chain, it covers all supply chain entry points, activity entry points, and team member entry points. You can ask, it would be a reasonable question. How do we assess an entry point? And I will answer, we don't. Microsoft does. Microsoft does
Mhm.
assess each entry point. They, their assessment usually shows, and this is going to be my next exercise. I'm going to show you how Microsoft assesses entry points, how they assign this label, which one is activity, which one is a supply chain, which one is a finance, and how they apply it. So let's take your example, applicable, like quite applicable to our whole exercise.
So the
So
reason I put this question, just 1 second, I'll take it for you. The reason we build one add-on or
mhm,
in-house development on
mhm,
top of a kind of extension to the supply chain, the purchase order process.
right.
Okay. And
Mhm.
the only user will be using the customized or developed screen, which will be then later linked to the purchase order and goods receiving. So is this Teams or activity users license will be sufficient enough for that user? Or do we
No.
need to assign him the finance user? Because without finance, supply chain will not be assigned. Because
I
supply
don't.
chain cannot be assigned directly without having the finance base licenses used
Supply chain can be purchased directly, separately
hmm
from the finance. It can be purchased. It can be purchased
separately.
as an attachment. It can be purchased as an attachment to finance.
hmm
And these are two different scenarios. Again, depending on your user requirement. And you will see the user requirement right here. Uh, you need to set up a test user and uh, let uh, the system calculate it for you. You need to set up the test user and wait for from 2 to 8 hours until the user is updated in the licenses usage summary report. Once the user is
hmm
updated, you will see the whole picture. Like here, look, this user requires 3 licenses. One is going to be a full license, like supply chain management license. The other two
hmm
are to be attached licenses. This is a very, very bad role. I created this role on purpose. You see, it's called webinar with the today's date. I created it on purpose to show you a ridiculous scenario,
mm
really. But in this case, the user will require 3 licenses, and you will see it in the licenses usage summary report. You don't need to ask anybody. The usage summary report will show you everything, what user needs to have, right? And it's up to you whether you want to purchase a finance full license, base license, and supply chain attached, human resource attached, or supply chain base license and finance attached, human resource attached. What you cannot do is you cannot purchase human resource base with the finance and supply chain attached, because human resource base is much cheaper. Microsoft does not allow us to go with a base that is cheaper than attached licenses.
Oh,
So I cannot answer your question, but they can. And
okay.
licenses usage summary report will do. Once you configure a test user and you configure your scenario, you will see everything here. However, so what we need to do right now, we exported our example. We created two additional keys. One is the access level. You probably heard that Microsoft assesses your entitlement by access level here, right? This is an access level. Write versus read. What's right? Write is everything what's not read. Like if anything rather than read, like any access rather than read is granted, it's a write access. I provided a formula that you can use here. Yeah, I'm showing. The formula is here to populate access level, just to make it your life easier. And then you need the key to merge two tables. And then you need to export entitled entry points. So how we export entitled entry points? We go to the role here. We select the first license. We filter by entitled, yes. And we export it. Export all roles. Download. Then we go to the second role. Again, we filter by entitled, yes. And we export it. And we do the same with the third role. We filter by entitled, and we export it. We exported everything. We placed exported spreadsheets into the separate columns, into the separate tabs, and we added a key field to each spreadsheet. And then we need to merge them. We need to join them. So everything what you need to do is you need to run the VLOOKUP function looking for the key column in the first spreadsheet. In the second spreadsheet.
This security is much of them looks like more complicated than the whole implementation process.
I
Thank you
agree
so
with
much.
you. I agree. Yes, I agree with you. I do agree with you. And with like from webinar to webinar, we try to make it simpler for our attendees. We try to show the ways how you can analyze. However, like how can you analyze, right? This is the way. So I found entitlements for each menu item and each SKU. And my first question is why HR? So I need to find what's entitled here in the HR and not entitled for other licenses. I have two menu items that are added, and they are driving under a privilege. They are driving HR requirement. However, if you look at this privilege is the worst example. This is what I call it. This is the worst example. This privilege requires two licenses. It requires HR license, no other entitlement, right? So it's a pure HR entitlement, and also it's entitled to finance and supply chain. So it's a mix. This is a mix that usually costs the most. When we have these mixes in our security analysis, we see a very high license requirement on the licenses, like over licensing. on the licenses that normally are not there. How does it happen? Once I asked, like, how does it happen? And the guy was asked to create a privilege that would be responsible for the maintenance of the cost type. This is a real example. The cost type, you see, cost type is here, and cost type is everywhere else. Cost type is here. Cost type is included into the other menu entries, menu items, entry points. And this cost type is actually a cost type from the HR module, while the other cost types are from the supply chain modules, and they drive two licenses in the same privilege. When it's two licenses in the same privilege, we're done. We need first to clean privileges. We go down to the privilege level and we clean privilege. We clean privileges, we remove licenses that are not required. But in this case, most likely the guy doesn't need a human resource license. We need just to remove these two menu items from the privilege and this privilege, and we will save quite a lot on the human resource attached. This privilege is going to be pure what? Finance or supply chain? Finance or supply chain is calculated. What license is I'm showing here we are exporting everything. We create a key. I'm just skipping, right? Because we are quite short of time. So what license is required? What license is required? Finance or supply chain? If we're looking at the priorities, supply chain priority is higher than finance. So most likely it's going to be supply chain. And by default, the engine will calculate supply chain in such a requirement because supply chain priority is high. Let's say we deleted, we clean this, let's say we deleted this requirement from the privilege. We cleaned the privilege, and now we only see, we still see human resource, as you see, we still see human resource, but along with the human resource, there are other entitlements. As we discussed, again, according to priorities, the other SKUs will bypass human resource. It's either finance or supply chain. So we have pure supply chain here. We do. And we have pure finance here. These two menu items, they will drive two different licenses. So the next step would be to remove privileges from this role, privileges that require pure finance or pure supply chain. So this we play this game all the time. What's the requirement? What's the entitlement? And we find those ones that are exclusive entitlements, that the ones that don't have the other entitlements, and those ones are they show us the privilege that is exclusive supply chain in this case, or exclusive finance. Let's look at exclusive finance. What is the exclusive finance? This one, right? Okay, exclusive finance. This is a privilege exclusive finance because we have an item, menu item that doesn't have the other entitlements. So this item drives exclusive finance, and this one drives exclusive supply chain. And we go deeper and deeper and deeper, and we just find the way to reorganize security so that it's pure, and we apply telemetry on the top. What's used, what's not used, what's utilized, what's not utilized, and we do it. We go down to a very pure configuration when we build a role that is going to be fully utilized by the user. No more than, right? No more than required, like minimum viable security. Please, questions. I see we a little bit of overtime, but if you have questions, please feel free to ask. If you can stay with us, great.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, this is all I wanted to show you today.
Yeah, we appreciate that time. I mean, you put so much effort. Though Microsoft has made life complicated, but you try to simplify. Thank you so much. And
Do we
appreciate it.
try? And please feel free to follow up this example. Feel free to run through the same exercise, and you will find lots of interesting things.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
And that goes for everyone else too. If you would like other answers to different questions, feel free to enter them in the meeting chat here or email us directly. I'll go ahead and chuck Morton and my emails into the chat here for easy reference. And otherwise, we'd like to thank all you guys so much for coming out today. It's been a great session. It's been great to see everybody here. Hopefully this helps you wrap your head around everything going on with this remediation process. We know it can be a little tricky, so hopefully this has been useful.